What's going on, guys? Sorry, I got a little held up. I was dusting for fingerprints with Jane Pauley. Today, we're going to talk about the third and final part of the original trilogy, Scream 3. Let's go. What's going on, guys? Foos here. Today, we're going to talk about Scream 3. But before we get into that, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody that's checked out the reviews for Scream 1 and 2. If you haven't already, put a link in the end of this video here for the playlist. Please go check those ones out. Otherwise, let's get into this one here. So, Scream 3 was released in February 4th, 2000. It's the first one, I believe, to have not been released in December. This one came about 2 years after Scream 2, so a little bit of a bigger gap than we had between the first film and the second film. This is also the first one we have where we do not have Kevin Williamson writing this movie. We had it turned over to Aaron Kruger for this one, and this movie faced a laundry list of issues throughout the writing process, different rewrites and script leaks and all the different violence and cinema controversy as a result of the Columbine tragedy. So there was a lot of hurdles that this writing staff had to get across with this movie. And it's kind of unfortunate in the sense that we'll never really know what Scream 3 was supposed to be as a movie. We know what we got, obviously, and that's kind of what we have to judge it off of, but there's always that, that kind of thought, like, hey, how good would the movie have been if we didn't have to go through all these different restrictions and rewrites and all that different stuff? But, it is what it is. We have the movie that we got. So, we do have Wes Craven, again, directing this one, so that's a positive. Anytime you got him, you're in good hands there. A lot of original cast returning here for this one, main character-wise. You got Neve Campbell returning, Courtney Cox, David Arquette. Also get Roger Jackson back as your Ghostface voice. I got a shout out to that. So, yeah, we also get a decent handful, of new cast on this one as well. You get Patrick Dempsey as our Detective Kincaid character. This was, I believe, pre-Grey's Anatomy fame there. We get Scott Foley in the Roman Bridger role. Also, a side character that I enjoy in this one. We get Parker Posey in the Jennifer Jolie role, which I find her to be pretty amusing. We'll get to that more later, but overall, this one takes place in Hollywood. We're on the set of Stab 3, which is being filmed there. And at this point, Sidney, our main character, she's kind of gone off the grid, so to speak, in an attempt to keep her friends and family and herself and everybody as well safe, and try to avoid any contact with anybody that might want to try to come stab her. So we don't really see her as much throughout the first part of this movie, outside of a few little points here and there. But obviously, Ghostface is going to make an appearance if you're making a stab movie. So we start getting killings on the set of this movie. And in doing so, the killer is leaving all these little breadcrumb clues about Sidney's past with her mother, in particular. So eventually it gets to the point where Sidney has no choice. She's got to come out, handle business against Ghostface. So that's where we're at with this one. I'll start this one off. We're going to go backwards a little bit compared to last time. I'm going to hit the negatives. We'll finish off with the positive stuff on this one. For me, starting off with the negatives would be opening scene wise. I just feel like it's a big drop off from what we get used to on the standard for Scream movies with the first two. First one being obviously one of the greatest opening scenes in movie history, and the second one, while not up to that same standard necessarily, is still a very good opening scene. We get this one here that just to me feels pretty inconsequential. Cotton Weary, as I stated in my second review for Scream 2, big fan of that guy in that movie. He definitely changes though when you get to the third movie. He's gotten his 15 minutes of fame, and it's definitely changed how he seems to be acting and behaving. We start off with him on his phone, and he's talking to his agent about movie roles, and he's complaining about scripts and all this different stuff. And eventually gets a call from Ghostface, who's threatening his girlfriend, who we have no knowledge of or have no connection to whatsoever. So the fact that Ghostface is threatening this girl has, no care to me, honestly, quite frankly. So that's a trend you're going to notice in this one, in the negative section for me. But Cotton's girlfriend gets attacked, all that stuff. Cotton comes back, he gets killed. Doesn't really get paid off much throughout the movie. It seems like it's trying to just an excuse to kill the main character early for me. And outside of a couple cool little moments that I find funny, it's just very under par for a Scream opening scene, in my opinion. At least there's a couple moments I do find funny. The little ironic moment where he's coming home, obviously, in a hurry. So he's road rage everywhere. He's cutting people off. He's almost causing accidents. He gets back to his house and he's running in and his TV's on. And it happens to have his show playing, where you can only imagine, I assume his girlfriend was just watching his show. And he happens to have the topic of conversation at the moment of road rage in Los Angeles and how all these people need to be stopped and everything like that. So I find that to be kind of funny. And, just a small little thing that I noticed when Cotton gets stabbed, you notice the blood splatter on a Ghostface mask. Silly little detail, but I find it to be nice. But otherwise, rest in peace, Cotton Weary. We hardly knew you in this one. Continuing kind of with the sentiment I had towards Cotton's girlfriend as having no attachment or no care, that she was going to be, cut out of the scene there. I felt the same way about a major part of the cast of this one. You don't really get an attachment to many of the characters here. Most of them you could care less when their time comes. In particular, the Stab 3 cast. Kind of what I said a little bit in Scream 2 about negatives as well was that the over-the-top kind of hokey cheesiness of the Stab sections of the movie, I feel like that's much of the same here in this one. The characters seem parody in the worst kind of way, and outside of, for me at least, the Jennifer Jolie character, that just don't really offer much. I guess Sarah Darling, when she's attacked, there's a couple of little lines she delivers that are funny about, why is my character taking a shower after her boyfriend's just been murdered, and why doesn't she have a gun in the house after her boyfriend's just been chopped into fish sticks? A couple little just poking fun at how unbelievably silly some of these things are sometimes. Outside of that, none of the characters really make you care too much about them, and that's kind of not really the norm for Scream. It may be for some other slashers and you kind of get used to it there, but I feel like for the most part, Scream up to this point had done a decent job of making you invest yourself somewhat, at least, in most of the characters. The other negative I'll give this one is that the kills seem mostly underwhelming. And while Scream has never really been one of those movies that you're going to expect all these outlandish type of death scenes, it still seemed in this one like excessively underwhelming. And maybe that's not a fair criticism considering everything we talked about before with all the rewrites and how much the movie had to be scaled back. That's maybe just part of what we get from that, but it's still one of the things that you take away from it that I wish could be a little bit different. But after that, we'll move on to positives here. And for me, I feel like I have a decent amount of positives on this one. We'll see how it goes. Scream 3 is one of those ones that, while it still probably is towards the bottom of my list, it's grown with me over time, I'll say. And so starting off with the positives here, first and foremost is just the continued evolution of Sidney Prescott, the character. While, like I alluded to earlier, we don't really get her as much as I would like in the earlier parts of this movie. She's definitely just a scene here, a scene there, a scene here, whatever. And then we get to the point where Ghostface calls her at home and she has to kind of, say, all right, it's time to go fuck up Ghostface. But I wish we got a little bit more leading up to that. But we do kind of, see how she's evolved with her going off the grid. She's assumed an alias. She's working on a crisis helpline. So she's, trying to do whatever she can, it seems like, to help other people, which says a lot, I think, about the character. I feel like there's a lot of people that have gone through everything that she had gone through would probably just be trying to stay as far away of people as possible. But one of the other things I will say that's positive about the early Sidney Prescott scenes that I enjoy is the scene with her dad. Because we don't really see much of Sidney's dad outside of the first movie, where we get a couple scenes with him there. And I feel like it's kind of cool to be reminded that he does exist. Because it does illuminate to you that, hey, this is a major part of her family that because of everything that's going on in her life, she's kind of alienated herself from. And there's a lot that comes with that. You can imagine if you have your family member that, you love and you care about, but hey, it's in my best interest to stay as far away from them as possible and try not to talk to them. You can imagine how that would affect a person. But so other than that, I'll say positives. I'm going to go back to another one I kind of mentioned earlier. couple characters in this one that just crack me up. And while I know you're not supposed to watch a Scream movie for comedy necessarily, there's always been elements of comedy in Scream, and I feel like these two characters in particular just they do something for me. And it's Jennifer Jolie, as I mentioned. She just has a lot of lines in that movie that crack me up, particularly when she calls Dewey to her house after Sarah Darling's been murdered, and she's going back and forth with Gail a little bit, and Gail's asking questions about where the murder was, and she hits her with the Nancy Drew line. Nancy Drew wants to know where. I don't know why that always cracked me up. And then you have her doing the dramatic walk and jump into the arms of her security guard. No, it's just silly, comical scene for me. But and as she starts to follow Gail around as a tag along and all that later in the movie, there's just a lot of little moments that crack me up. Another one that I'm going to point out is the sidekick detective, Detective Wallace. Again, just a lot of lines throughout the movie that he delivers that are hilarious to me. Early on in the movie, after Cotton's been murdered and they're on the set of the movie, and the guy asks me, is there any reason, to think this has anything to do with, Cotton's murder? Hit that in the movie being connected, and he goes, well, he was making a movie called Stab. He was stabbed. That one always got me. And obviously the Destined for Fingerprints with Jane Pauley is a classic line. But between those two, they just provided a lot of comic relief in the movie for me that, it's one of my favorite parts of it, if I'm being honest. But moving on to a couple other scenes that I'll mention that in this one are, probably some of my favorite scenes in the movie outside of the third act, where I feel like by far that's the best part of the movie. But a couple other early scenes I'll mention are the Woodsboro set scene where Sidney is kind of walking around in the house and she's having these little flashback moments and recollections of Billy and all this different stuff. And then eventually Ghostface, starts coming after her, pulls her out the window and all that. One of the things I'll point out about that scene, though, that we'll come back to a little bit later, is the odd moment where right before Ghostface pulls Sidney out the window, the door that she has braced shut is still getting jostled, which begs the question, there's two people involved here, right? I don't know. Maybe that's just me overthinking this, but I don't see how you could be jostling the door outside of the bedroom and then get immediately outside the window, unless Ghostface is starting to teleport. But Randy didn't mention that in any of the rules, and I'm pretty sure he would have been on top of that. So that's something we'll come back to in a minute here. Another scene I'm going to mention is the dream sequence scene where Sidney sees her mother coming up through the yard and up to her window, and she kind of gives her the whole little piece about how, she's just like her and all that. But that's kind of a positive and negative one, though, for me a bit, because I will say it takes me out of it at the end when Ghostface, just the little jump scare thing. I feel like the scene would be better served if it just was Sidney had that dream sequence of her mother, and then she just kind of woke up in a, we left it at that. But, whatever, it is what it is, I'm sure there's somebody out there that loves the Ghostface jump scare. But those were just a couple scenes for me that I enjoy about it. And then, as I kind of mentioned earlier, the third act for this one is awesome. I mean, Sidney is in, again, full badass mode in this, and Roman Bridger, while early on in the movie as just the director character, he's kind of, just another character. I do feel like after the reveal comes into play and he's given his motive and, he becomes more Roman Bridger, the brother and the son, I love the way that he plays that role, and I really genuinely enjoyed the motive. I know some people aren't a fan of going back and adding to something in a previous movie, especially the original, especially one like Scream. But honestly, for this one, I feel like it works well. You get a believable scenario where this woman could have gone off and had this other child that she didn't necessarily know about, all the different, details of how he came, who he's, who he belongs to, obviously, unfortunately, due to the circumstance, and have some sort of resentment to where she left that child behind and started a new life. That child could plausibly find her and attempt to track her down. All these things are very believable. If she did, in fact, turn the door in his face, you could see how that could turn somebody in a certain type of way. And then the Billy and Stu angle, two young, impressionable teenage boys that are clearly not all there, being manipulated and turned in a certain direction, is a very plausible situation, I feel like. So that whole motive works very well for me. And adding yet another layer to the whole Sidney situation, where now she's faced with, oh shit, I have a brother. Oh shit, my brother is a killer. And all of these fucked up things that she finds out about her mother, this is just compounding movie after movie for this character. But I really enjoy that third and final act. I feel like maybe it goes a little overboard with the killer being indestructible thing, but you know, bulletproof vest, I guess, whatever. But but yeah, I'd still put that in the positive category for me. I enjoy the third act of this movie quite a bit. Outside of that, I feel like that pretty much sums it up on the positives. A couple final thoughts on this one, little tidbits of things that I find kind of cool or whatever, I guess. The line that Roman delivers early in the movie when they're on the set about, you know, if we stop making, you know, scary movies, all the psychos in the world will just disappear. I feel like maybe that's a little bit of a direct little shot at the process of writing this movie and everything that they had to go through. But another little side tidbit thing I'll point out, since we didn't really talk much about her in any of the points, is our girl Gail, but probably at her most unlikable for me in this one. Don't get me wrong, Courtney Cox is great. She plays the role incredibly well, but the character of Gail Weathers, cannot stand her in this movie. And I mean, there's so many points where she's just got this attitude about her, and she clearly, she thinks she's the most important person in the room every time she's on screen, and I guess Gail Weathers is supposed to be that way, but I'm just waiting for it. Her time's gonna come. She's been the terrible journalist person for too long, you know. She has numerous moments in this where she's caught lying with the camera that she's claiming she doesn't have. You know, the story about the tire blowout where she's clearly, you know, blowing the story out of proportion for sensationalist journalism. There's a lot of unlikable things about Gail in this one, and I haven't even talked about the bangs yet. Can we talk about the bangs? I mean, are we beating a dead horse here if we talk about the bangs? My goodness, what was happening there? As she said in Scream 5, stage an intervention if she ever sets those up again. Whew. And now I'll sum it up on this. Kind of talked about it a little bit earlier when we talked about the Woodsboro scene, the Woodsboro set scene, I should say. Are there two Ghostface in this movie? It's never completely revealed, obviously. It's never confirmed. We leave it at the fact that Roman operated alone, but did he? I mean, there's a lot of evidence that you could point to really in this one that makes you question the point I made about the Woodsboro house. There's a door moving literally right before she gets pulled out of the window. Then you also have the situation where Dewey mentions to Gail that someone called looking for Sid's file at the studio, and it was a woman. Now, granted, that could be argued that Roman was using the voice changer, pretending to be a certain woman asking for the file. Maybe. Or maybe it was a woman. Maybe it was a woman named Angelina. Who knows? Because that woman makes herself very suspicious multiple times throughout this movie. You have her situation where she's taking props from the set as souvenirs, but she feels the need to hide crouched up on the top of a toilet in the bathroom stall while Sidney's in the bathroom to hide them. And then when caught, she's weirdly obsessed, it seems like, with Sidney Prescott. Also, you get the situation at the house when the house explodes where she's weirdly missing and comes out of nowhere at the most suspicious time possible. When asked where she's been, she responds with this, you know, complete change the subject type of response about the guy that she seemed to hate 15 minutes ago that was still in the house when the house blew up. But again, just a very suspicious character. Why is she so suspicious? I mean, hey, we might never find this one out, probably, but you know, we can always wonder, was she involved? Because even when she's killed, hey, Roman was technically killed in this movie too, so that doesn't really mean shit. Hey, something to think about. Do you think Angelina was involved? Quite frankly, I'm kind of starting to think she might have been. But anyway, guys, that's all I got on Scream 3 here. For me, we're rating this one out of 5 stars. It's going to be a 3 for me on this one. And look, if 3 is your bottom of the barrel type of movie in your franchise, you're doing pretty damn good. Can't wait to jump 11 years into the future, into the new generation of Scream when we talk about Scream 4. It's going to be a lot of fun with that one. Should be coming at you before too long. Just keep your eyes out for that. In the meantime, like I said, if you haven't, check out the Scream 1, Scream 2 review. Like, comment, subscribe, share it if you dig it. Appreciate all the support. Really means a lot. Thank you guys. We'll see you on the next one.